It's hard. I mean, this is
6 months. Dude, I would start roasting a person. If a girl told me she was sad because her hamster was dead like 6 months ago, I'd be like, bro. Every single girl I know has at least one guy in their life that they talk to one fucking time and then messages them forever. Too many people will spend their whole lives thinking that they're the exception to every rule. But I mean, obviously you see the contradiction when most people think they're the exception. You're setting yourself up to be f***ed, you know? They should never get shot down by a guy that looks like me. And when that happens, like a switch flips and the entitlement mode kicks on to the fucking max.
Let's get into the fifis right away. How do you personally deal with rejection, Steven?
Well, what can I say? I'm a Giga Chad, you know? If I get rejected, I just move the fuck on. It might take a week or two, but yeah, I'm not a good person to ask. I think I have an atypical processing with that because it seems like whatever bad emotional thing I get involved in, as long as I get away from it, in about a week or two, I'm always like baseline again. When it comes to almost everything in life, actually, and actually you know this really well because you said you work with addiction and stuff, I think that one of the most important things to get out of anything is you have to completely remove yourself from that thing. If you get rejected by somebody and you're kind of like really into them, if you try to be friends with them, if you keep messaging them every day, if you keep doing shit like that, you're gonna destroy your mind. You will never, ever, ever break whatever the fuck you're trying to get away from, I think.
Let's say you get broken up with. You might be fully like disconnected from the person, like say you've even like moved away or they're long distance or whatever. So like in every way you have been cleaved from them socially, but psychologically you can't get away. Because like some people will maybe do everything they can to cleave, and yet psychologically this person keeps popping up in their mind. They have dreams about this person.
Does that really happen a lot?
Them on all the social media. I feel like yes. I feel like a lot of people when they talk, like especially when I'm reading through some of the submissions that are talking about like rejection, it's a lot of people who like have been distant from their ex for a really long time, but they like can't get over their ex, kind of like no matter what.
Oh, I just remembered. I don't believe it. There you go. That's how I make sense of that. I don't believe it.
That they've fully cleaved?
Yeah. I bet that they're still checking social media every now and then. I bet that they're still going through their Facebooks, the Twitters. I bet they still hear things. Yeah, that's what my guess. I bet they're doing that social media stalking shit. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, where they're like putting the person's name into like Google and like...
Yeah, and like checking in on them and seeing what's going on. That would be my guess, yeah.
So is essentially those people like lacking self-control?
Yeah, I think self-control is really hard. I try to do like a reasonable slope off. Like if I'm coming off of like a bad rejection, I just try to keep track of my behaviors. So like immediately after, I'm like watching all the Instagram stories, watching their Twitter, trying to guess what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. I'll give myself like, okay, I'll do this for like a few days. That's fine. And then after like a week, I try to say, well, where am I at? Maybe I'm only checking like once a day. And then after 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not like checking anymore. But like, yeah, I'll try to like gradually slip it off. It's probably not, I think like all things in life, you have to set realistic goals for yourself. If you get rejected from somebody, it's probably not going to be realistic to say, I'm going to break it off completely and never even look at a single thing. Like you're going to want to. And the problem is when you set an unrealistic goal, when you break it, well, now you just want to go fully into it again. It's like, I can't help it anyway. So now I'm going to message her and I'm going to try to call her and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, yourself. It's like, yeah, I probably understand that like, if we're talking about rejection insofar as like it's a person you were really into, you get shot down, then you have to like, you taper off slowly. And then over time, hopefully you're, away from it. Yeah.
What you're saying of like in a couple of weeks, like people get over it, that feels for oftentimes like, especially like rejection's one thing. Do you lump breakups in with rejection, or would you consider that like a different kind of emotional experience to go through?
Way, way, way different, I think.
Okay. Do you want to define why they're different for you?
A rejection has to do with like a mismatch of feelings. Like you thought you were into somebody, you shoot your shot, or you thought they were into you, like you were into them, and then you find out they're not, and that kind of sucks. And there's a whole bunch of like, well, what could have been, and blah, blah, blah. But breakups and getting dumped or broken up with, there are way more different things that could have happened with that could make that way different. Sorry. Like the feeling, the experience of rejection, I think is more or less going to be the same across like, oh, you got rejected by a girl. Oh, okay. Like we can talk about that. And it's going to be more or less like, here's like the template for rejection. This is what happened. Right. That's how people feel. But breakups can happen for all, it's so much different. Like what does it look like to get divorced when you're in your 50s? That's a really weird thing for a lot of older people, or even in your 30s and 40s. Or what does it look like to get broken up with somebody that you've been dating since high school and now you're in your late 20s? Or what is it like to break up with somebody when you have children? Or what is it like to break up with somebody when you're super integrated into their family? Like breakups are a whole different thing, because once you've been dating for some level of time, the amount of like life integration and the reasons why you break up are way different too. Like breaking up because like two people kind of slowly drift apart and fall out of love over time is a lot different than breaking up because your spouse cheated on you, which is a lot different than breaking up because they became abusive or got addicted to something, which is a lot different than breaking up because they had to move cities for job, right? So yeah, that's what I mean when I say they're way different. Like rejection is like a pretty simple contained topic. Breaking up and why that might make people feel bad is like really complicated. There's a lot of different things that could play into that.
When I look at breakups, I often look at it through the lens of a grief processing, because it seems to be the case in like breakups. This is why, for example, like when you've been in a relationship for a long time, I would expect you to take oftentimes several months to fully like emotionally process that, because we see like in general grief processing seems to take between like 4 months to 2 years, depending on like the intensity of the grief and whatnot.
Is that true? Is there research on that? 4 months to 2 years?
Yeah, typically so the research that there is there, I mean, anything like grief, which is like not the most psychologically defined construct, is going to be take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, usually what we see is, especially when people seem to return back to normalcy as far as like functioning and stuff, it can take up to 2 years typically. That's like would be a standard expectation. So this would be a study looking at like parents who have lost their child to like sudden death or something like that, right? So a really intense form of grief.
Jesus. That sounds really long. I'm way out of the norm there. I think I'd give Nathan I'd give him 12 months of grieving for sure.
Yeah. Why does
2 years?
1 year seems reasonable. 2 years.
Well, for like, I can understand like death of a child. That's a really big, that's a huge thing for sure.
Yeah.
There are like a couple big events in life that I could see. Like a really traumatic divorce, I could see taking like a year. A year is a long time. But like, I guess it depends on what we define grieving as. Like death of a pet, I could see taking like a couple months. But like if at 6 to 12 months, you're still like, I can understand like being like a little sad, like, oh, I miss like my dog Bear or whatever, sure. But if after like 6 months, you're still like crying about something or you're having like big emotional reactions, that seems so bad to me. I might be really off the norm there.
It's hard. I mean, this is what
6 months. Dude, I would start roasting a person. If a girl told me she was sad because her hamster was dead like 6 months ago, I'd be like, bro, you got to move on. I don't know. I might be fucked there. Sorry.
I mean, this is why it's so tricky, right? Like when you're looking at, especially like at a psychological level, the difference between like grief and depression, because they look exactly the same. The main difference is grief is a very reasonable reaction to like a tragic event, whereas depression is typically one of the main markers of diagnosis is going to be it's like a disproportionate response to whatever event you feel is like triggering the depressive episode. But it's like how do you measure grief? I would agree, like hamster especially, I'd be a little bit concerned if it was like taking longer than a year for sure. Especially like if we're going by the metric of returning to like normal functioning, so like able to go to work.
Okay, when you say returning to normal functioning, how long are we talking here?
So again, the study that I looked at was looking at dominantly, like most grief studies focus on pretty big events of grief. So we're talking about like child deaths or like really, really messy divorces. The divorce one is tricky because you've got like a conflating construct within there, which is some messy divorces, especially if there's a kid involved, can take up to 2 years to properly finalize with like custody.
I'm not asking, I'm saying the grieving process. I'm trying to figure out how long you can call off of work here. Well, my best friend when I was 21, I called off work that night, but I went into work the next day. Are you telling me I could have milked this for like weeks?
So, I mean, most employers don't give the adequate amount. Most people get like, even the more like generous countries I've seen typically only give like maximum like 3 to 4 weeks.
Damn.
And then after that, you have to take like a stress leave typically.
Okay. Well,
I do think you're a little bit on the atypical side for this one. If you, something major happens and you're going to work the next, you actually think that if your son died, you'd like be into work like next day?
My son died? No.
Okay.
I said I'd give him a year. I'm not taking a year off work though.
No. Yeah. How long would you take off work, do you think?
Damn, if Nathan died, oof. It would really depend on what happened. Like if he had like a rare like heart condition and he died, I think I'd be like pretty upset about it. But if he
like
died,
a motor vehicle accident or something sudden and unexpected, essentially.
Well, if he died for a reason that I felt like I could have prevented, I'd probably feel a lot worse about it, and it would probably bother me for quite a bit longer. I think the biggest, not to get too personal with me because I don't know how relevant that is, but I think I'm a very lucky person in that my emotional baseline is very, very, very high. As long as nothing is actively fucking with me, no matter how like deep I get dug down into something, I'll usually bounce back in a week or two without much like deliberate effort. So maybe I might be like, I'm just like really far off the norm there, because I've had like, yeah, my friend killed himself. I've had pets that I really love murdered by my fucking demented grandparents. But generally, like after like a couple weeks, I'm usually back to like, okay, I just want to play video games. I want to do stuff and like go out, and like I'm very high functioning. But I guess, but then people like you think I repress everything. So who knows? Maybe someday I'll self-destruct and go postal or something. But
yeah, that's true. That is true. You either repress or there's something else going on, right?
yeah, maybe.
Okay, so we wanted to talk about rejection specifically.
Yeah,
rejection
true.
and breakups.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. Because I was gonna ask you then. What do you when you say rejection? Are you including breakups in that, or I feel like it's a fundamentally different thing, right?
Yeah, I think once you outline the two differences, absolutely, that they would be a majorly different thing. I do think, because you said rejection's kind of like the same thing. I think it gets really complex for people, mostly because there is an element of like, rejection fundamentally means like there's something about you, like obviously. So people who take rejections really poorly. So a lot of times, for example, I'll kind of say this to like pickup artists and stuff as well. The difference between like a boy and like a nice guy for women is like nice guys are the guys who give you the vibe like they're really like probably extra doting for something. And they're the kind of guys that when you reject them eventually, if you reject them eventually, they take their L really poorly. They'll usually like snap and scream and call you names. And so I kind of say like the boy's gonna like break your heart and like kind of like use you and toss you away, which is a terrible experience. But like the nice guy might like come and steal your eyeballs. Here's the main thing though. I think a lot of guys are willing to own up to being like a fuckboy. I don't think any guy. Do you think like the nice guys, like the quote unquote nice guys, guys who take the rejection really poorly, do you think they're self-aware that they're one of these guys, like one of these people who take it poorly? I
was chatting with a friend literally an hour and a half ago about exactly this. And I brought up the example of when you're coming out of mushroom trips. Mushrooms are very weird because they come and they go in waves where you're like, oh, am I still high? Okay, I don't think I am, but the wall just breathed. Am I right? You have this weird thing, you don't know what the fuck is real. And I have the same wonder for a lot of these guys. Do you have any idea how absolutely fucking insane you're being? I know every girl that I know, maybe I can add you to the list, every single girl I know has at least one guy in their life that they talk to one fucking time and then messages them forever. Months or years afterwards, they still send them messages. And like, my rule is like, if I'm feeling extra cringe, I might do 3 or 4 messages. But I'm generally like, if I send you 2 or 3 messages and you don't respond to me, I figure you're not interested and I move the fuck on. Maybe 4. I'm really, if I'm either really horny and it's somebody trying to fuck, or if I'm really emotionally fucking mind that I'm super desperate, I might do 4. But like past that, it's so cringe. Like obviously you don't like me as much as I like you. Obviously something's going on. I have to figure out a way to extricate myself from the situation because it's just going to be really cringe if I keep hammering it home. Yeah. I don't know the guys that can do that shit. They just like fire forever. And it's like, dude, do you really think she's going to be like, oh my God, hello, I'm here to respond to you. 500 messages. That was actually what I was looking for. And after 500, I knew
that is the right amount of pursuit.
Now I'm going to go ahead and respond to you. Like, bro.
How do you know if your friend is like that guy, like that creep, right? Because like the whole drama around like this slick thing is like wild to me because how it even started is insane. Like what guy in their right mind thinks it's a really good idea to go check the pulse of a woman who's sleeping while there's other people around to like witness it? Like it's insane batshit crazy stuff. And so like I always wonder, like I don't think a lot of these guys would be self-aware because like part of what I want to do is like if we have, because I suspect we have viewers who are these types of people and they're going to be so in self-denial being like, I'm not one of these guys. And even if I give examples of text messages of these types of guys and how they take their L, they'll still be like, yeah, but there's a reason why I did it in my way.
And that's the thing. So everybody has a reason. Yeah, there's always going to be a justification for why. Yeah, I'm really careful that when I argue with myself or I'm trying to figure out my things because you can bullshit yourself into a lot of cringy behavior if you're not careful. It's not really related, but I learned this for poker. If you know enough math in poker, you can like bullshit yourself into any stupid fucking decision because there's going to be some way to justify it mathematically. Well, this is a really bad hand, but if I play this hand here, my implied pot odds are really high because nobody would suspect. There's like a lot of dumb shit you can say. And I think it's the same in real life too, where it's like, okay, well, normally this would be really cringy, but she did tell me 2 months ago that she did really like me and I was special. So like maybe something, there was that weird thing that happened. Like, it's stupid.
So do you think it's just like the classic, like, I'm just a special carrot? Like, I'm I'm a special circumstance. I'm not like part of this like norm that's going on for these people. Because like in addiction, for example, part of like an addiction counselor's job, for example, is to like break through like a lot of the like coping and denial that like people who are in addiction. So like, I don't know if you know the stages of change, but we identify like 5 major stages of change. And the first one's called pre-contemplative, where essentially we would say like somebody isn't even aware basically that they have a problem. They're in full self-denial. It's obvious to everyone around them at this point that it's a problem, but they've like figured out enough copium strategies to like be unaware. And so like we have a number of techniques that like addiction counselors are like trained in to break through and get them from pre-contemplative to contemplative. And so like for addiction, there are signs and techniques that I've learned to like, here are a collective number of signs that like, if you check off this list enough times, this is probably true about you. Can you think of anything for like these nice guys, like things for like, so that they're listening to like, maybe like, what are signs that like somebody might be a nice guy? Cause I have no idea.
Signs that you might be a nice guy.
So like the guy who takes his L poorly. I don't want to call them nice guys because I fucking hate that characterization of it. But
I mean, it's usually just people that can't take a hint. I guess it's interesting because, so you saw me walk through a lot of this. We talked about this related to my big problem like a month and a half ago. I think something, I don't remember if we talked about this privately, but something that I brought up a lot during that when I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I feel like more people need to do this. Instead of trying to rationalize from your perspective, what the is this person doing? What's going on? Like, I'm trying to think of blah, blah, blah. I think that it's good to just insert yourself into the other person's mind and then figure out what would they do if they felt otherwise. So something that I'll do, like if I feel like I'm getting really hung up on a girl, usually if I look at their actions and it's like confusing to me, usually what I'll try to think is like, okay, let's pretend that I'm that girl and I'm as obsessed with me or she's as obsessed with me as I'm obsessed with her. What would the actions look like then? And usually if I back off and I look at it from that point of view, I'm like, okay, well, hold on. I wouldn't be taking a week to respond to messages. I wouldn't let something like this get in between like this circumstance. I wouldn't like all of this would be a non-issue because when I'm, at least for me, if I'm really into somebody, like I'm not gonna fuck around. Things are gonna be really obvious. And that's true for most people. If most people are really into other humans, most of them are gonna act like dogs. They're usually gonna be pretty affectionate. They're usually gonna be pretty straightforward. Maybe not with their feelings, but they're at very least like communicating and stuff. And if you think about it from that perspective, it should be pretty immediately obvious if somebody's into you or not, in most cases. But I think a lot of people have a really hard time like imagining other states of mind. So rather than looking at it from their perspective, they're trying to make all these excuses without considering, well, what would they do if they really liked you? Like if a girl really likes you, she's not going to be evasive or dodgy or unresponsive or whatever. She's going to be like super open. She's going to be messaging you first sometimes. She's going to be responding with like more than just like okay or whatever, you know. And if you're never thinking of stuff like that and you're constantly making excuses for why somebody's not responding to you or whatever, you're probably the nice guy or just somebody that has a hard time empathizing with other people's like states of mind, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart strategy. And then I always think about like, this is where I feel bad is that like, there's always those exceptions, right? So like Nick and I would have been fucked if he took that advice because like I will be self-admitted the fucking worst. Like I was a super hot and cold girl. Like I was super into him for like a week and then I'd back off and pull away and like act like I was going to set him up with a different girl and be like, we're just friends. And like, it was I was terrible, horrible. Would never recommend any woman behaving as I did at the beginning of our relationship. And like, luckily Nick was like able to basically decide, like, I think she's into me. She's just like probably like a little deranged or something and like pursue me enough that like we worked out. And I think a lot of people, when they hear this advice, they're like, yeah, but what if I'm the exception case? Because exception cases do exist.
I would say it's not worth it. No offense to you. I'm glad it worked out for you. But like, if I was giving advice to Nick, I would say, yeah, move on. Because there are exception cases. But like, I think at the end of the day, I see everything probabilistically. Like like there's always statistics. There's always chance behind everything. And you should always be playing the odds. The only exception, I guess, is at the very least acknowledge when you're being very impractical. I think there's one time in my life a few years ago where I did that, where I chased a girl and I was like, I know this is fucking stupid as fuck, but we'll go for it. But at the very least, like I was cognizant the whole time. I was like, this is like a very low probability, like I'm being silly. So if you want to do it, I mean, go for it. But just understand that you know that you're being like pretty irrational. Because too many people will spend their whole lives thinking that they're the exception to every rule. But I mean, obviously you see the contradiction when most people think they're the exception. You're setting yourself up to be f***ed, you know? I think that you need to have a really good view of yourself. And I think you need to love yourself a lot. And I think you need to have a good understanding of your positives and your limitations. I think that is incredibly important. I think that what we do as people sometimes is, I understand that I know I'm the odd one out a little bit, but I know that we're social creatures. And so we kind of draw a lot of the value of ourselves from the people around us. But I think one of the big reasons why rejection fucks you so hard is because it undermines your sense of who you are. Like something that I keep in mind that I think is relatively rare for guys is I know what I have to offer, and I know that not everybody's into that. And I also know that there are a lot of things that are big turnoffs for a lot of people. There are certain types of girls that I will never go after, or there are certain types of girls that'll shoot me down. And it's like, okay, like I get that. Like this is like, there are some girls that will never date a guy shorter than 6 feet tall, right? I'm never going to get a girl like that. But like, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me because I know that. I understand that's a limitation. But I think a lot of people, I'd say especially men, but it's probably true of women, but it's especially men. Men draw a lot of their self-worth from the validation they get from women. So when a woman shuts you down, especially men, don't see that as, okay, well, this woman thought that we were incompatible, or I don't have traits that she desires, so she doesn't want me. Instead, they think, I'm not a good person. I'm not good enough for this person. Because instead of viewing other people that are rejecting you as like, okay, well, you thought we wouldn't work out. What you really view it as them saying like, oh, you're not good enough for me. And if I'm a woman and I'm telling you you're not good enough for me, you're not good enough, period. And the rejection ends up having like this really nasty snowball effect on your self-perception, I think.
But I feel like guys who like take rejection really, really poorly, or people who take it poorly, are aware that they're getting rejected a lot. I just imagine that they probably externalize blame a lot. For example, like it's not like, it's kind of like the copium, right? Like it's not their fault. It's everybody else. It's the world's fault. It's her fault.
Yeah, they don't have the right genetics.
They offshoot the rage onto whoever's rejected them.
Yeah, they don't have the right genetics. Women are watching too much TV. The fluoride in the water is turning everybody's horniness off. There's always like some fucking weird black pill reason why it's completely outside of their control or some shit. Yeah.
Who do you think is more likely to react like that? Like some like more blue pilly guy, a red pilly guy, or like a black pill guy to like snap and react really, really negatively in the space of like a rejection?
I mean, it super depends on where every person is at. Like a black pill guy could snap and realize that because he's recognizing the black pill, or a black pill guy could be like, oh, well, I'm not gonna get mad. I just know that's the way the world works. I'm completely genetically fucked forever. A red pill guy might, snap and realize it because he's trying to do, it just depends on the person, right? Yeah. Anybody could.
Right. Yeah. You don't think there's any commonality in the people who react poorly to, other than like, I guess maybe we could say emotional dysregulation? Like, do you think people who are self-loathing are going to be more likely to react like this?
I'm not sure.
Because I could see self-loathing going two ways, causing you to basically like, if I perceive that my value's getting attacked, I'm going to hide and cope behind the mask of it's not my fault, it's your fault, to like avoid the self-loathing. I think I see that happen a lot with self-loathing. But then I've seen other people who are really self-loathing just like take their L and like fully internalize and shut down because they're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. I do kind of suck.
I feel like it's going to be tied a lot to your self-esteem. That's how I would feel, but. So like really high self-esteem people, I think you can get rejected a few times. It's like, oh, it's okay. I understand. Like this person didn't like me for whatever reason. The lower your self-esteem though, the more likely you are probably to get really upset about it because it's like tarnishing your character and your perception of yourself, I think. Yeah.
I wonder if like you have a super high self-esteem to the point where you feel entitled, if that could also lead to it though. Like people who have an overgrand sense of self and therefore feel entitled so that when they're getting told no, they snap because they feel like they've already earned that thing and they're not getting like the cookie that they've been promised.
Hold on, let me think about that for a second. I've had experiences with that where my intuitive response is I want to say that that's not actually self-esteem. I'm going to break from the norm here. Okay. I noticed this a lot growing up because I went to a prep high school with all these rich fucking kids with all these perfect fucking families. And I noticed something. I had very high self-esteem even through high school all the time. And I noticed that a lot of people threw that word around, self-esteem, but I didn't consider almost any of my peers to have high self-esteem. What I considered was that they had amazing support systems. So somebody would be like, oh, I have high self-esteem. And it's like, no, you don't, motherfucker. You've got like 10 awesome friends, a family that loves and supports you, and you guys are rich out the fucking ass. You have everything in your life going for you. Anytime you've got a problem, there's a million people to back you up. There's nothing self about what you're doing. You've got like external esteem. You've got like, you're powered by everybody around you. I feel like if you have really high self-esteem and somebody shoots you down, like, it should be okay. Even if you feel like you have high self-esteem, it should be like, okay, yeah, that's fine, it happens. One thing that I feel like happens though is people don't necessarily have high self-esteem. It appears they have high self-esteem, but they're really going off of like the validation they're getting from everybody around them. So like an issue that I've run into a few times, it's broken a few people, is I'm kind of like I would say that like if I'm trying, if my hair is combed or whatever, I'm like an okay attractive guy, like a 6.5 out of 10, some bull. I'm okay. Like I don't have any like horrible up features or whatever. I'm an okay attractive dude. Because of my status as a streamer and everything though, obviously I can hook up with girls that are very, very, very attractive. But I'm not like desperate to hook up with those people. And if there's like weird games and shit being played, I don't give a fuck. I'll go play Factorio. I've done this on trips before where I bring my laptop and I'm gonna play Extra Not Included all the time, and you can fuck off the other shit because it's too dramatic. And there are some girls that I've been with and I can tell that they don't normally get shot down by guys, and 2, they should never get shot down by a guy that looks like me. And when that happens, like a switch flips and the entitlement mode kicks on to the fucking max. And so when you ask that question of like, what if somebody has too high of a self-esteem, they feel like they're entitled to something, I feel like that's not high self-esteem. I feel like they're running high on the validation of a lot of people. And if they don't get that validation from somebody, they fucking switch and they feel like they're entitled to it. But I would call that something fundamentally different than self-esteem, if that makes sense.